All right, so before I get this started, there's a couple of things I'd like to put out front here is when we talk about behavioral health in the military community, it can be a heavy topic at times. And to keep this from ending this presentation, having everyone feeling down and bummed out, I keep it a little bit lighthearted. Don't think that for an instant, just because I keep it lighthearted, I don't care. This is truly my life's focus here, is working on behavioral health issues in the military community. I just keep it light for you. And I tend to go, and I don't like to be interrupted, but today I'll let you interrupt me if you have a question. Not a problem. Please feel free to ask. Okay. A lot of what you're going to see today is based on studies, national presentations, some focus groups, and anecdotal. This is where I get all this information here. We're going to talk about what makes us unique, the military community, and the deployment cycle and the impact it has on the families. So why focus on them? Well, that was a great discussion earlier about suicide. We know it's a pretty large topic in the military. I'll leave that alone. We also have post-traumatic stress. It's pretty prevalent in the military community. You'll see in the correctional facilities for Missouri, we had over 1,700 in December 2006 actually staying there. I call them justice-involved veterans. You can call them what you need to call them. Spouse abuse rates, unfortunately, have risen. That's just a snapshot of it. This does include child abuse rates have risen as well. But I would ask that you don't think it's just a uniformed service member causing these rates to go up. We're also finding that it's that sole caregiver at home during deployments that is also having some struggles with the abuse. And Missouri Veteran Treatment Courts, I'd imagine most of you are familiar with them. I'm proud to say that we have over 208 that have graduated over that time period listed. So this is some of the reasons why we focus on the military community. I want to give you some visual images here. When we talk about the military community, it's not just the person in uniform or the aging veteran population. Okay, it's the family, it's the friends, neighbors, etc. But whenever I say military community during this presentation, it is service members, veterans, and their families. Now I say that because when you're in the military, it's not just that person in uniform that serves, it's the whole family. They're all impacted by military service. Here's some stats. I would be a poor state worker if I didn't throw some stats out there, right? I got to do that. That's why I make this money, minimum wage. We have in our state veterans, active duty, guard, and reserve. We also have dependents. Dependents are the family members of the service member. And hey, my TBI buddy, could you hand my water down here, buddy? Yeah, right there. Thank you. Appreciate it. We have dependent family members, and yeah, they are the service members, spouse or children. But I would tell you, I met my wife at 19, and she swears she's never been dependent on me a day in her life. That's just a term we use, thank you very much, in the military, good, bad, right, or wrong. We make up about 9.3% of the state population, which doesn't seem too significant, but in large conferences, when I say everyone that has served or currently serving, please stand, and if you have a family member that is serving or currently serving, please stand, or a close friend, nearly the entire room, 90% plus, would stand up. So that goes to show you that this 9.3% of the state population can impact the entire state, and that's why I throw that up there. In the news and the media, we often see the term soldiers. Soldiers this, soldiers that. That's a little bit problematic if you're working with someone that has served, because we're not all soldiers, okay? You see here the 5 different branches of service. The top 4 are Department of Defense. That's neat to know, but not really critical. What I want you to see up there is each branch of service has a name. They call themselves, for the Army, for instance, we call them soldiers. For the Marine Corps, we kept it easy. We call them Marines. Don't want to confuse them. Sailor, airman, regardless of rank. There's got to be a Marine out there, right? I love saying that with a Marine here. and Coast Guard. They all have different names. When they're in uniform, it is appropriate to go ahead and call them by that branch of service. You can call them soldier or something. It's fine. You can have a more personal relationship because you're civilians, and you can do that too. You'll find out as you're talking to them what they'll be comfortable with. But I want you to also notice up there, think of these as fraternities and sororities. There is a competitive rivalry amongst these different branches of service. And I mention this because if you call a Marine a sailor, that's kind of offensive. They take that bad. If you call a soldier an airman, it's like nails on a chalkboard. You got to be careful with that. Okay, there is that competitive rivalry. So some terms that you can use that covers the broad spectrum of them. If they're in uniform still, you can call them service member. That's widely accepted until you understand more about their branch or decide to have a name-on-name relationship. Or if they're out of uniform, you can call them veteran. And you just heard recently, not everyone identifies themselves a veteran for different reasons, but that's widely accepted until you develop a more relationship. And I can tell you objectively, after 22 years of being in service, the Army is the best, okay? Just want to put that out there. Okay. No. That was a study I read. That was a study. So active duty versus reserve forces, I'm going to give you just some general differences between the two. Active duty, this is the full-time job for this person, the service member. This is all they do. They go in the morning to their installation, their post, their camp, their base, wherever it is they're stationed at. And this is their full-time job. They do fitness training in the morning usually, and then they do some work throughout the day. This is it. They're on duty 24/7. They can be called to go anywhere and do anything. And this is all year round. Not everyone gets vacation time at Christmas when you serve in the military. Some of the challenges here that used to be unique to active duty, and I'll explain that more in a minute. Long deployments and training. Now, a lot of the presentation I do is based on my time in Army and combat arms, but know that it's different throughout different branches of services and different jobs that you have. But long deployments and training cycles typically affect all branches. Some branches and jobs, they can deploy for a couple weeks at a time, like say aviation, doing their jobs. Some special operations people, they can deploy for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 9 weeks. My longest deployment in the Army infantry was 13 months with like a week-long break in the middle somewhere. Okay, so it really depends, but long deployments. And when we get told we're going to go on deployment, and I'll talk about this more later, but the training. Sometimes the training is long as well. I've gone on training trips that have taken, I think, 5 weeks total at a time. Some are just for a weekend, some are just a day, but sometimes they're long. We're held to military civilian laws and codes of conduct. We like to think of it as a higher standard. All right? An easy way to explain this, although not the best example, is seatbelts. Not every state requires us to wear seatbelts, but every military installation you go to across the planet, you're supposed to be wearing seatbelts. All right? You can be ticketed, even as a civilian, if you're driving on a military installation not wearing a seatbelt. That's just one example. We move. We moved often. Up here I have for 3 to 4 years. If you are married and a pretty stable job in the military, typically you can move every 3 to 4 years. You can extend to stay longer. You can pull it back and leave earlier. If you're single, you have the option of moving, typically 1 to 2 years. You can move on to your next job, new place. And these moves take us not only maybe on that same installation or within the same state, but to different countries as well. I spent about 9 years in Germany, total. And every time we move, we have to rebuild our social support network. Every time we move. Think about children moving, having to rebuild that social support network. You know, it's challenging for them already as their body changes and trying to fit in. I'm the new person at school. There's been some studies out there that talk about moving, I think 9 times, 7 to 9 times from K through 12 for children. Imagine having to reestablish their friend network every time. And because of this constant moving, well, I know you're going to, what's your first name?
Chris.
Chris. I know Chris Chris and I are friends. We're stationed at the same place together. We're stationed at Mizzou. We're both Army infantry, because that's the best. But I know he's going to leave soon. So why should I have a really deep connection with Chris? He's going to be leaving soon. And after a while, we tend to keep people at arm's length. And this is a generalization, not everybody like this, but we keep them at arm's length. Or when Chris leaves, what's your name, sir? Patrick. Well, he leaves, so now I have to be friends with Patrick because my best friend's gone. I need that social support network. Don't like Patrick a lot, but I got to be best friends with him now. Okay? We have to keep reestablishing. We keep getting used to loss. People moving over and over. Okay. Guard Reserve Forces. You could think as Guard as state, Reserve as federal, and you can think of this as part-time, and it's a horrible term, but it's one people are used to hearing, okay? 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, they don the uniform and perform duties, unless they're called up for other things. Like we know Katrina and all this stuff, National Guard, you keep hearing our floods. We have a lot of floods in Missouri. This is crazy. We can't seem to figure it out. It's almost like Texas here. But we keep getting called up, okay? So this is part-time. So they have regular jobs. They work in factories and everything else and jobs just like you do. And then they don that uniform for just a short time. Challenges. Now I mentioned earlier, these challenges here are unique to active duty. Well, because we've been at war so long and the Guard and Reserve have been called up so many times that they also share a lot of these issues as well as active duty. But some other unique challenges they have: separation from job and school. So what's your first name, please? Nancy. Nancy? Okay, thank you. She has her own business. She makes pottery, and she does it out of her garage. She has a website, and she also serves in the National Guard. Boom. Hey, you're going to go deploy. What happens to her business? Okay, it suffers. What if you're at school, a highly competitive a highly competitive slot for a certain course, a certain degree program, and they don't have military-friendly policies at that school? All right, it has some challenges. They live in areas removed from the military or from the military community. So if you're active duty, you have to live on the military installation or in the surrounding community, very close. There's actually a regulation that tells you how far away from a military installation you can live. Okay, so the Guard and Reserve, they don't have this. We have people that drill down at Cape, that live in Cape, that drill up here at Ike Skelton in Jeff City. We have people that drill out of state or come from out of state and drill with us because it's based on a finite number of positions for that particular job. Okay? So when they have these deployments and they come back, instead of being around communities near those installations like the active duty or actually on those installations that know about the military experience and they can share this unique experience with people, they're isolated. They're by themselves. They can't talk to other people about this stuff typically. So that's part of the one of the unique things about the Guard and Reserves. We all have our own jargon. You lawyers have a lot of jargon. I can't read documents you put out. I can't understand them. I'm sorry. I only took English. But we have our own jargon as well. And even within the branches of service, it could be a little confusing, this jargon. Here's an example. Secure the building. The Army will post guards around the place. The Navy will turn out the lights and lock the door. Marines will kill everybody inside and then set up a headquarters. And the Air Force will take out a 5-year lease with an option to buy. So even within the branches of service, the jargon is a little bit unique. There's a lot of similar, don't get me wrong, but there are some unique pieces to it as well. So when you're working with people that are military connected, it's good to try and understand some of the jargon that's going on. But up front, when you first make contact, you can say, hey, you know what, I'm really proud that you served. I appreciate your time in service. I'm still learning about the military community. So when it comes to your, sharing your experience, you can hold back a little bit of the military terms. I'd appreciate it. That prompts them that you care, and at least for the first 5 minutes, they'll hold back on some of the jargon. Okay? Other ways to learn jargon, if you're really interested, you can go online. There's a lot of resources for you there. And you can start attending some other military functions. In your veteran organizations, they have a lot of functions out there. And if you can attend a little bit of it, do the mixers with them and learn some of that jargon as well. That'll help you build a better relationship with the person you're working with that's military connected. So here's some images I want to share with you about the military experience. The bottom left, which might be hard to see, it's all about the teamwork, the intensity, the physical and mental demands of being in the military. In the middle, you have loss, unfortunately. And we're no stranger to that, being at war so long. On the top right, you have moving, relocation. I said every 3 to 4 years if you're a married family, typically. But I would tell you, my family was never smiling like that when the truck pulled up, except when we left Louisiana. It was way too hot. So here's some things to keep in mind when working with the military. First of all, not all of us have served in combat. Now, we've been at war a long time, sure. Odds are there's a vast majority that have served in combat or in operations that have supported combat. An example would be someone may actually have to go to Germany for a year or so because the people that were stationed in Germany had to deploy to a combat environment. So that's what I mean about in support of combat operations. But not all of us have served in combat. And if you run into people that have not served in combat, don't think that their military experience has not had some kind of effect on them, especially a traumatic experience. That would be incorrect. If they say they have not been to combat, keep talking, keep working with them. Because, you know, we have many hazardous jobs. Nuclear, biological, chemical would be one example. Demolitions, another example. Some of our training is pretty intense, and people actually die during training at times. So please don't negate that military experience just because they have not deployed and been to combat. Not all are combat arms. What that means is the job that directly engages the enemy, like a tank or a rifleman, etc. Those are examples of combat arms. Not all of us are in the combat arms. But again, we may have many hazardous jobs that were not combat arms. Like I said, nuclear, biological, chemical is just an example. Okay? Not all of us have had to kill. You know, the military is, we're trained to engage and destroy the enemy against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I'm sorry. Yes, against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Not all of us have had to kill. And if we have killed, we don't like to talk about it. These are generalizations. I get it. Some like to get liquored up and talk about it, but as a rule, we don't. So one of the worst questions you can ask us is, hey, how many people have you killed? I went through a drive-thru once at McDonald's, and I was in uniform. A little kid asked me, hey, you serve? I said, yeah, I serve, buddy. He goes, thanks. I appreciate it. How many people did you kill? And in my mind, I was thinking, well, I got room for one more. I didn't tell him that, but boy, I tell you, it is a horrible, horrible question. You know, if you were raised in a fairly stable house environment, you were raised to be kind to others, to not hurt others. In the military, they break that down, they strip it from you, and we don't kill people, we engage the enemy. We engage and destroy the enemy. That's how we psychologically separate from the event. And as you heard from the earlier panel, it doesn't work too well at times. But again, that's one of the worst questions you could ask. Not all of us have behavioral health issues. As a matter of fact, a vast majority will serve entire military careers and have very good functioning coping skills, networks, etc., and not have behavioral health issues. We just like to focus on those in the military, and that's fine by me. I work in behavioral health, so I like the attention. But not all of us have behavioral health issues, okay? Keep that in mind. And not all of us are the same. Not all service members and veterans are this good looking. There are some ugly Marines out there. But when you work with one, you work with one. Keep that in mind. There are some generalizations which I'm talking about this morning, but when you met one, you met one, okay? Don't just lump us all into the same thing. What makes us unique? Okay. I have to start this off by saying these are generalizations, and I mentioned that a couple of times already. My earlier days giving this presentation, people would attack me. John, that's not me. I didn't write this for you specifically. These are generalizations. Okay. So the differences between civilians and military. Self versus team. In the civilian community, what's in this for me? How is this going to advance my career? Why should I take my time? Why should I get off the couch and do this? In the military, it's about the team, the unit, accomplishing the mission. Selfless service is one of our values, which we live by. Okay? It's not about us. We have to make the mission. We have to complete the task. It's all about the team, helping the person to our left and right is what we say. So because of this, we tend to talk down our own achievements. I have a lot of ribbons and decorations on my uniform. I too have a list of stuff up there that looks really sexy. And if you start asking me about it, hey John, what'd you get that thing for? What'd you get that thing for? I'd probably say, well, you know, cleanest vehicle, all right, sharpest looking uniform, or just stuff I did on deployments. But if you ask me, hey John, what did your unit do? What did you do in Colorado? What did you do in Iraq, John? Well, my unit, we did this and this and this, and I could talk all day long about the unit. So if you're having issues connecting with people individually, maybe you could start shaping that conversation and say, hey, what did your unit do? How did they participate? What did they do? And that could get the ball rolling. We're easier to talk to when we talk about our unit than ourselves typically. Open versus closed society. I love this one. Sir, what's your first name? Jack. Jack, what's it take to be a member of the civilian society? Yeah. So just to be initiated into the civilian society, you have to be a rule, abide by the rules?
Initiated, you don't have to do very much.
You have to be born. Boom, you're born. The first thing you all remember is this person with the mask coming at you and the gloves and the bright lights. You started screaming, right? That's all it takes to be a member of the civilian society. But in the military, it's basic training, advanced individual training. It's hot days, cold days, 24-hour days at times, multiple days of staying awake, physical endurance, mental toughness, and a lot more. We're taught to problem solve within ourselves too. Deal with the issue at the lowest level. And because of this, we tend to be a little bit closed off to the civilian community. If you haven't been in our boots, and you've probably heard this before, you just don't know. You got to walk in our boots a little bit. All right, so we're kind of a closed society. When we do come out and talk to civilians, something's going on. So be ready for us. And I'll talk to you a little bit more later about how to do that. Less structured versus very structured. You civilians are not as organized as us military people. And that's a general statement. Some of you are probably very organized. But I would tell you, sometimes when I see civilians come to work, and I still call them civilians, even though I've been out a couple years, man, I tell you what, it's, I think they say, well, let's see what I'll do today. That's not how we do it in the military. We have training schedules that go about 6 weeks out. They tell us what time to wake up, when to do hygiene, when to do fitness training, when to eat, when to have formations, and that thing we're doing today. And if you don't know what that thing is, there's some manuals listed right next to it on this training schedule, so you can go look up what that stuff is, get a little smarter on it before it happens. All the way up until lights out. 6 weeks out, every hour of the day is accounted for. And then we have larger schedules that go like 6 months out, and they talk about the big things. We're going to go training for 2 weeks here or something big over there. We love this organization. When you're working with someone that's military connected, like say a veteran who's been detached from the military community for a while, maybe they miss that structure. So think about it as a tool is maybe give them some structure when you're working with them. Giving some task and purpose. Giving them some deadlines. Don't overwhelm them with them, but give them some deadlines, some targets to reach for. Maybe they miss that structure. If you tell them to be somewhere at a certain time, you be there. Right? Angela said 5-minute break. 13 of you took 10 minutes. I'm just kidding, I didn't count. Okay. All right, my beautiful band of brothers and sisters. Our job has inner conflict. We talked about moral injury earlier this morning, which was great. I love that topic, moral injury. And like I mentioned earlier, we're kind of told to be good people growing up, and the military makes us change that to where we have to engage enemy combatants. Another piece of this conflict, and you may hear this a little bit more from Vietnam veterans than I've heard from from more recent deployments, is sometimes they've had to make a call that actually injured or killed civilians. And that's something that's really stuck with them, causes a lot of inner conflict. Talk down their achievements, I mentioned that earlier. We can skip that one. And the problems are just a byproduct of service. We got some sayings in the military. Suck it up and drive on. That's one of them. I even think I heard Angela say that once. Don't quote me on that. And FIDO. The PG version is forget it and drive on. You could do the R-rated version on your own. I don't want to share that. But we're just told to suck it up and drive on. So let me give you just a really quick example of that. I've been deployed several times, different combat zones. Did the ground assault in Iraq, Kosovo, Desert Storm and Shield. And it wasn't until my very last tour in Iraq, a second tour in Iraq, where I lost some soldiers. Never lost troops before. And each time I lost a soldier, I was not physically present with them. So in my goofy mind, I kind of associated not being with them is why they died. Kind of a weird connection, but it's just how my brain worked at the time. And as I had troubles with this, I just tried to deal with it on my own. Suck it up and drive on. And eventually that turned into combat stress disorder, which gave me a week of inpatient treatment in Iraq, where I had to write out things and talk about my feelings, which I was grumpy about the whole time. I don't like to talk about my feelings. Talk about my feelings. I thought a hippie was going to come and hug me soon. I was going to hit him. But I know hippies are nice. But I kept trying to deal with this on my own. Suck it up and drive on, suck it up and drive on. And this went on for a couple more years. I tried different approaches. I tried some painkillers, tried a little bit of booze, but not bad enough to where I needed AA. And eventually, when my unit deployed again, when I was no longer serving over there, I heard my troops are going to go on another deployment, kind of rushed all that stuff back. And then I was kind of diagnosed with PTSD for a little while. But I kept trying to suck it up and drive on, you know, suck it up and drive on. And I kept pushing more emotional baggage into my rucksack, just kept filling it up with more images and more problems and more concerns. And it just got huge because I kept sucking it up and drive on. That's what we do. The bottom quote there, others need that more than me. That's why we don't go and seek help sometimes. You heard the stats about suicide earlier and about so many not going to the VA. Some of us don't feel like, you know, we're really that bad, so I'll let other people use that. I'm not going to clog up the services there. I'll let other people use that. I don't need that. And that's part of why people don't go seek treatment. And you get dummies like me that have problems later because of it. So how can we support the military community? Well, I told you earlier, when we come to you, we don't do this too often. It's important that we're validated, heard. Sometimes you may hear some wild stuff. I was special operations answering only to the President of the United States. And I can't tell you where I've been. Okay, put a pin in that one, all right? And keep moving. You sitting there saying, no, you're nuts, is not going to help the conversation. Put a pin in that one, keep moving, listen to them. We'll answer yes or no in discussion. We love brevity. That's what we do. Don't ask me if I had enough sleep last night. I might have fell asleep at 1 o'clock and got up at 4, and I'm alive, so to me that's enough. Ask me how many hours of sleep I got. And your personal beliefs, this one's near and dear to me, because as I shopped around for different clinicians, I had problems connecting with them, engaging them. One time I finally started talking about one of my combat engagements, and I had a very visual image. It was on a second floor window and a white curtain as I was engaging this person. And so when I started talking about this, and white curtains, and whenever I'd see them in the civilian world, in a second story window, it kind of started bringing me back to that engagement. And so when I was talking about this particular engagement, this clinician stopped me. He said, "Oh, you poor thing. You shouldn't have to go to war. War's bad." And that kind of pulled the rug out from under me as a combat infantryman who'd spent most of my adult life learning to protect and defend this country. It's tough. Don't use your personal bias, your personal beliefs on the person when you're working with them. If you don't like war, don't like war. I don't care for it, but don't press this on them. You don't like guns? You're probably in the wrong state. But don't like guns. That's fine. Those are your personal beliefs, but don't push them on the service member or veteran that you're working with. All right, deployment cycle. Still on time. This is a 4-model deployment cycle. There are many other types out there, but I like using this 4-1. It kind of helps paint the picture. So pre-deployment phase, this starts when you're alerted to go on deployment. And this also works for active duty, guard, and reservists. It typically is about 6 months out, if not longer. If you're a specialty job, like say a cardiac surgeon, and that's in dire need up there in some deployment area, you could actually leave as early as like a week. I've heard stories like that. It's been anecdotal, but I've heard that. So for the service member, once you get pre-deployment, this is where the training gets intense. A lot of certifications, qualifications in order to deploy on all our systems, whether it be weapons or communication, etc. All this is going on. It is late nights, lots of training. I talked about training cycles and deploying. Well, that also goes in there. As we're a few months out, we may go off for 4 or 5 weeks on a training deployment as we're getting ready. And it's also a HoneyDo list. That's something the spouse gives us as we're getting ready to go. You're going to disappear for 6 months, 8 months, a year. Here's this HoneyDo list. Get all this stuff done before you go as you're pulling in lots of extra hours at work, getting the unit ready. And that is the service member's sole focus, is getting ready for deployment, because we have to make sure everyone is ready to go so no one gets hurt over there. For the family members themselves, at first it's denial. I've had a spouse or two come up to me saying that their service member can't deploy because they're going to a wedding or things like that. Or family reunions coming up, and they're all looking forward to seeing Johnny. And I'm like, well, I'm paying him to deploy, so he's going. So first it's denial. And then the HoneyDo list coming up. And then the spouse, the family, they kind of get upset because, why aren't you home more? You're going to disappear for 6 months. Why do you keep training? Why do you keep doing stuff late into the night or over the weekend? So there's a little bit of friction there. It causes some problems. Then the deployment cycle itself, this is where the service member goes to wherever the deployment is, whether it's stateside or in a combat environment. Because yes, when they go somewhere stateside, that's still a deployment. Hurricane Katrina was a deployment for some service members. And that's where they're just solely focused on the mission, the task and purpose at hand. This is where they focus on not only completing the unit mission, but taking care of their service members that they work with. This is the sole focus. This has also changed a little bit now with technology. Those in the current operations have a lot of access to computers and phones now. So they're starting to get phone calls or messages, emails, or FaceTiming talking about, oh, I got a flat tire today, what am I supposed to do? When they're 1,000 miles away in some foreign country. It gets to be a little more stressed. For the family themselves, especially the spouse, it starts off with a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, for at least the first, say, 60 to 90 days. And then what typically happens is a strengthening period occurs, where they've established new systems, new routines, new patterns, new social support networks. They understand how to juggle getting 3 kids to 3 different places, ballet, karate, and soccer, right? All by themselves instead of having that service member with them to help. Okay? Very good. The redeployment phase, so this is the part where we come back. Don't know why we call it redeployment. It's still a deployment, but we call it redeployment. And this is where we actually return back home from deployments. For the service member, you know, it's a tough time, it's a struggling time, depending on how long you've been and what you've been under, what kind of traumas you've experienced and the stress. But this is where we come back and we kind of try and reestablish our role in the family. And I say this because we kind of picture it as the same as when we left. And we also have different expectations of the reunion than our spouse may have, or our family may have when we come back as well. Okay, so an example of this is when I came back from a long deployment. It was Saturday morning. I went out to get the mower, and you can imagine I had my, cut off way too high shorts on and really super tight tank top. Said, I love David Hasselhoff. I went to the shed to grab the mower, and my son comes running out, and he goes, Dad, what are you doing? And I said, well, son, it's Saturday. Saturdays I mow because Sunday's football, right, guys? Watching football. Oh, you're Mizzou, so you like Saturday football too, don't you? Okay. So I got to get this done Saturday. And he goes, but Dad, I've been mowing since you left. And I get $5 for mowing. And I get a comic book, a candy bar, and a soda. So now here's Dad thinking, well, I could say, screw you, kid. It's my job. All right? Or I can give my kids some comics and candy and let them keep mowing. So then I went back into the house after my son wrestled me to the ground and said, yeah, go ahead, you mow. And I go up to do the bills, and my wife comes running up, John, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm doing the bills. Right? I'm the guy. And she goes, well, I got the bills already paid for. This is what I've been doing since you've been gone. So then it turns into this, well, if you could do all this without me, why do I need to be here? And that's part of the struggle with the redeployment phase. How do you reintegrate into the family? And the family also understands that there's a new normal. This is not the same person. Or there's big concerns that they're going to be a different person when they come back. My wife, after I deployed and did I was part of the initial Iraqi freedom engagement. We did the ground war. She actually left when I came back from deployment. She saw me for 2 days and had already planned on leaving, going back home to Germany for about 2 weeks. She said, I'm going to give you time to, relax, decompress. She didn't say decompress. She cussed at me in German, but yeah. It might have been decompress. I don't remember. But because everyone back home was so worried, big offensive, lots of violence, injuries, some deaths, and that she was concerned. What's John going to look like when he comes home? And so she thought she'd just leave for a little bit and let me relax. So it's readjusting to this new normal, which is very challenging. And then post-deployment phase, this is where this continues. And this is where we go from just, I'm back, let me catch up and drink all the beer I missed for the 6 months I've been gone. So they booze it up on the first weekend. Then they booze it up on the second weekend. Well, as we go into the post-deployment, and now we're talking 6 months out maybe or longer, they're still having these benders. They're still trying to do everything and be the wild person. And sometimes that translates into them suppressing stuff. Untreated, undiagnosed things. And then they have issues, like was talked about earlier. And all these partying and drinking to forget and remembering people that have lost or incursions that happened turned into bad discharges. Okay, so I'm glad that discussion came up earlier. This is part of the deployment cycle. This is what we go through. And it's still navigating the roles, even after 6 months. And it's starting to have those behavioral health issues pop up. They don't happen as soon as you step off the airplane. It takes a while for them to appear. Okay. And I tell you what, I appreciate your time today. This was exactly 40 minutes, which is what she gave me, and that's awesome. I do appreciate your time today. Thank you very much.